Decision on the fate of a law that restricts access to hormone therapy and other health care for minors going through a gender transition. The High Court just now allowing a Tennessee law that bars such gender-affirming care to stand. This is the very first time the court has directly considered a law like this restricting this type of health care, and now could pave the way for other laws in other states impacting this type of transition-related care for minors.
Today, the Supreme Court just ruled that transgender people have no constitutional protections whenever it comes to the medically necessary care that we need. In the Scrimeti ruling, they said that it is perfectly legal for a state to ban our health care. They claim that discriminating against our health care is not sex discrimination or trans discrimination. Instead, they're only discriminating against gender dysphoria. They literally say that it's not discrimination because gender-affirming care is banned for cisgender and transgender people as well. And how on earth does that make sense? It's trans people that suffer from gender dysphoria and that need access to gender-affirming care. This is the same logic that was used in Loving versus Virginia, where the state of Virginia tried to argue that it wasn't banning black people from marrying white people, but rather it was banning interracial marriage for all races equally. It's the same logic that was used to ban gay marriage, where courts argued that each person is equally free to marry somebody of the opposite sex. It's a horrific ruling, historically so. The only silver lining is that they didn't rule on broader trans rights issues. So for now, rulings on passports and bathrooms and more are still safe. But it's clear that this court is intent to dismantle any rights that we have, not just transgender people, but all minorities. I'm so sorry for the trans people today who are out there struggling, especially with this ruling. Take care and hold on to hope, because we will continue to fight until we can't anymore.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about a bombshell ruling from the Supreme Court in their decision that has upset the trans activists and the liberals. Okay, the left, they are very, very, very upset. There's going to be a lot of liberal tears in this video because the Supreme Court has decided to uphold a ban on gender-affirming care, aka sex change operations, for kids, youth in Tennessee. Okay, so Tennessee banned gender-affirming care for minors, restricted gender-affirming care for minors, and the case went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 ruling, majority basically sided with the state, sided with Tennessee, and they upheld their ability to ban gender-affirming care. Now, Justice Roberts wrote that the ban addresses medical and scientific uncertainty, not a constitutional prohibition under the Equal Protection Clause. Thus, the court should defer to lawmakers, not intervene. Basically, what the Supreme Court is saying is that when it comes to medical decisions and things like that, that's for the states, right? The states, lawmakers, it's their job to regulate that. It's not the job of the Supreme Court to come in and to essentially overrule state lawmakers when it comes to the ability to make decisions on medical treatments and things of that nature, right? That is essentially what the Supreme Court is saying. Now, again, this is a big deal because Tennessee's law becomes a precedent enabling similar bans in 26 states that have also put out similar bans as well, too, on gender-affirming care, basically signaling broad state-level authority to regulate transgender youth and to impede future legal challenges. Basically, this is set in stone. The debate is over, right? States have the right to ban this stuff if they want to ban it. And if, you have individuals that still want to allow their child to undergo so-called gender-affirming care or hormones and, sex change operations, then they're going to have to go to another state, right? They're going to have to go to a state that allows that in order to get it done. So without further ado, let's go ahead and watch a news clip to learn a little bit more about what's going on here. And then we're going to get into some liberal tears. So without further ado, let's get it.
Let's get to some breaking news from the Supreme Court. The court ruled to uphold Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. It's a stunning setback to transgender rights. Let's get to CBS News Supreme Court and legal producer Catherine Cole in Washington for us. Catherine, thanks for joining us. Can you walk us through this latest ruling from the High Court?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest rulings we're likely to get from the court this year. It says that a Tennessee law can stand. And that law prohibited children who suffer from gender dysphoria from accessing medicalized treatment. So puberty blockers, testosterone, estrogen, things that allow kids to medically or physically transition. Tennessee said, look, there's not scientific consensus about whether this is safe for kids, good for kids. We're not having that here. And today the Supreme Court said Tennessee can do that. And so if you zoom out here, what the court really said is that states can decide for themselves what level and what type of medical treatment children with gender dysphoria can access. And it's kind of an echo of the major abortion ruling a few years ago, which left the question of abortion to the states. This leaves transgender care for minors to the states. We're likely to see red states and blue states diverging in terms of how they're going to handle this issue now.
Yeah, so Catherine, what legal issues on gender-affirming care were not resolved in today's ruling?
Yeah, that's a great question, and certainly one that transgender rights advocates are going to be asking themselves today. What paths are still available? So the people challenging this law brought it as a discrimination lawsuit. They said, this looks like sex discrimination, or maybe discrimination on the basis of transgender status. And the court today said, no, there's no constitutional discrimination issue with this kind of treatment. But what they didn't answer is the question of parental rights. That is, do parents have a constitutional right to dictate the care that their children receive? That question remains wide open. And so going forward, what we're going to see is sort of a patchwork quilt. Right now there are 27 states that restrict medical treatment for transgender children. That will stay put, but people are going to be challenging those laws under other guises going forward.
Okay, Catherine Cole in Washington, thank you so much for your insight.
Honestly, they should just give up, right? If you want your child to undergo so-called gender-affirming care, have them wait till they're 18, or just have them go to a blue state, right? If they really want it that bad, okay, it's the same thing when it comes to abortion, right? I mean, the states have the right to say that they're not going to allow it, and it is what it is. Now, obviously the woke activists, the trans activists, the liberal activists, they're really, really, really upset about this. They're boohoo, whining, crying, talking about this is dangerous. This is going to lead to kids losing their lives. You know all the same arguments that they always make that really are not effective in moving the needle when it comes to how the public generally views this issue. Take a look.
The Supreme Court voted to ban transgender care for minors in Tennessee. And the whole thing about this is there is literally like a pattern with what our government is doing and like who they are targeting, because in February, like when it was Black History Month, it was all this DEI conversations. And then when it was Women's History Month, it was, the SAVE Act. And Mental Health Awareness Month, RFK, was like, we need a database for everyone who has autism all of the sudden. And then now in Pride Month, the Supreme Court has ruled to basically keep a ban on transgender care for minors in the state of Tennessee. Like, they're targeting these groups at these specific times. It's kind of like interesting. I don't know. I'm just seeing a pattern. Like, they're literally doing it during the awareness month. Like, that's when all these conversations start. That's when they start to try to like do some weird behind the scenes shit. And it's like all lined up.
Let's make one thing abundantly clear, and it is that parents, guardians, caretakers deserve the autonomy to make decisions that benefit the well-being of children, whether or not they are trans. This is a dangerous overreach by our government to step in and take away that power and that authority from parents. And if you think that this only stops at trans kids, you are mistaken. Today, what the government did was stepped in and took the place of parents and guardians and medical professionals. If you have kids, trans or not, you should be concerned. We told you all in the beginning when he took office and started to sign executive orders that trans people would be his scapegoat in the beginning, but that everyone else would begin to lose their benefits and their rights along with us.
The United States Supreme Court's right-wing majority today chose politics over science, chose bigotry and prejudice over the medical decisions of professionals and the personal decisions of families. In United States versus Scrimeti, the court had to go to make-believe to come up with a way to allow states to deny transgender youth the medical care that their doctors have prescribed and that their families have agreed to. In his decision, Chief Justice Roberts wrote of a fierce scientific debate and of medical and scientific uncertainty over medical care for transgender youth. But the reality is the only way to find such a debate or such uncertainty is by ignoring the fact that not one single legitimate medical or psychological association has ever done anything but support gender-affirming care.
The Supreme Court just upheld Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for trans youth. Let's be clear, this decision will cost lives. Transitioning, in fact, saved my life. Before I had access to gender-affirming care, I was suicidal all throughout high school and college, and I'm not alone. More than 40% of trans youth seriously consider suicide. But when they have access to gender-affirming care, that risk drops dramatically. This ruling forces families into impossible choices. They may have to flee their state, split up their families, go into debt just to keep their kids alive. The court didn't just fail us, it chose cruelty. It gave politicians the power to override doctors, families, and trans youth themselves. It betrayed every child who needed protection, and it turned its back when it mattered the most.
Trans people waiting until they're 18 to begin going through gender-affirming care doesn't work, because a huge part of gender-affirming care is stopping unwanted puberty. And mind you, a huge part of this is also the horseshit that you see around sports when they're saying, oh, well, you went through male puberty. Yeah, well, bitch, we're trying to not do that. The same way when trans people who pass are treated with some higher degree of respect, or we're treated like we're some exception to the rule. Oh, well, I never would have thought you were trans. Yeah, because gender-affirming care works and I didn't go through male puberty. People on here love to act like looking masculine as a trans woman is some kind of crime. Meanwhile, in the next breath, they'll say something stupid like this. So do you see, in the ways in which we talk about trans people, there's no way for us to win? No matter what we do, oh, well, we were either groomed too young, we started too early, we waited too late, you look too much like this, you look too much like that, oh, you must have some kind of biological advantage here, oh, well, you were too young to even possibly know who you were then. You just can't stand that trans people exist, and I don't know how to tell you this, sweetheart. That's not a f***ing option, and that's not up to you.
Yeah, so you see, now you heard that, okay? A whole lot of liberal tears, right? A whole lot of people upset about the fact that the Supreme Court says, hey, you know, the states can decide what they want to do in regards to blocking gender-affirming care and sex change operations for minors, for kids. Now, I don't understand what these activists don't understand about the fact that this issue is not scientifically settled. In fact, the science is leaning towards the idea that, hey, this is not exactly safe. I mean, look at what the European countries are doing now when it comes to banning this stuff for their children, right? And they're more woke than we are, right? I mean, they're much further left on social issues than us. And they've studied it and they said, yeah, you know what? This is probably not good to be offering this stuff to kids, to children. Yeah. And for whatever reason, people just refuse to accept the fact that this is not 100% safe. It's not 100% safe. It's honestly irresponsible to have kids making these decisions at such a young age, right? I mean, the main argument for why children should wait till they're 18 is because, hey, you know, that gives them more time for brain development to be able to understand exactly what it means to transition and the ramifications and consequences of that. Because a lot of these changes are in fact permanent, right? Despite what these people claim, some of the stuff that is done to these kids, again, is permanent in nature. And I just don't think the kids have the ability to really comprehend the decisions that they're making at such a young age. And I personally don't even think the parents, in some situations, really comprehend the decisions that they're making on behalf of their kid, due to the fact they're even considering letting, again, their child below the age of 18 go through this in the first place, rather than encouraging their kid to wait, or, you know, getting them counseling and all of the you know, treatment outside of, again, gender affirming care that, you know, they will need in order to handle whatever they're going through, right? That would be the absolute last thing that a parent should consider. And again, you know, I think a responsible parent would at least push it off as long as possible, right? Again, at least into the age of 18 minimum. And we all know why these doctors are doing it. We all know why they're on board with it. It's not because they're responsible medical professionals. It's because of money, right? This is a money train, right? You get one of these kids on so-called gender affirming care, you got a lifelong patient coming in. That's just money. Okay, so again, they're doing it for money. It ain't about the science. It's not about, ethics or, anything like that. It's about the money for them. That's a big deal. That's not something I think children can really comprehend. And I think it's just better to make them wait. I mean, to be honest with you, I would wait till the brain is fully developed before I allowed it, right? Like, for example, I think mid-20s is when the brain is basically fully developed. Yeah, I would make them wait until then, because I think up until that point, you don't really have the ability to make an educated, and a rational decision about what to do, right? There are people who early on in life say, hey, yeah, I don't want kids or whatever. And then they decide in their 30s, yeah, I do want kids, right? And in a situation where you have teenagers making decisions like this, I think it's impossible for them to know and to make a decision like this in a responsible way, right? Understanding what they may or may not want later on in life, what they may or may not regret. And I think it's just better to be safe than sorry. And, ultimately today, it is in the realm of state lawmakers to decide what's okay and what's not okay. This is consistent with the Supreme Court's recent overturning of Roe v. Wade. And here we are, right? And people are going to, cry about it because it happened on Pride Month, right? Which, again, is kind of funny that all of these rulings are kind of coming in on Pride Month, right? So it has not been a good Pride Month for the activists. But, hey, it is what it is. Our country is headed back towards a direction that I think is best for the country. And hey, you just got to deal with it, right? At the end of the day, I think we've thoroughly kind of won, when it comes to some aspects of the cultural battle that has been happening in this country. I think rulings like this is just another W for the right, for conservatives in regards to, again, the cultural battle in this country. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.